Rosie was a 15-year-old girl. She would often find ways to get what she wanted, no matter the cost. One day, while attending school, Rosie got into an altercation with her friend Lalamissa. "What did you just do?" Rosie demanded. "I am so sorry, Rosie. It was a mistake." Lalamissa said it was an accident, but Rosie didn't see it that day. Rosie got very angry and started fighting with her. The other classmates gathered around them, being entertained by their fight. Rosie and Lalamissa started pushing each other. Suddenly, a teacher arrived and caught them fighting. Rosie was waiting in the principal's office, waiting for her parents. Then, Lalalimissa's parents came and started blaming Rosie. Then Lalalimissa's mother said, "Ma'am, it's all because of Rosie. She often disturbs my daughter. I don't know what's wrong with her, but I can give you an advice. You should expel Rosie from the school. She's abnormal." Rosie couldn't believe what she was hearing. As Rosie was about to say something, her parents arrived, but instead of blaming Lalamissa, they asked forgiveness for their daughter's behavior. Rosie's world was turned upside down hearing this. Rosie went back home. She was very upset of what just happened today. Suddenly, her window glass breaks by a stone. Rosie was shocked. She noticed that there was a letter along with it. She read the letter and wondered who could this be. It was evening time. Rosie slyly opened the front door and ran outside the house. She went near an ice cream shop and waited there. Suddenly, a man grabbed Rosie's hand. Rosie turned her head and saw a boy of her age. She couldn't understand what was happening. The boy said, "Rosie, I know you don't know me, but trust me, I will help you get revenge. I know you got detention because of Lalamissa. She's very bad, and I am here to help you. I had sent you the letter to talk with you. I have a plan, but you have to believe me." Rosie couldn't understand what was actually happening. Should she trust him? And how did he know so much about her and Lalalisama? Rosie hesitated. "Okay, tell me what to do." The boy said, "Meet me at 8:30 p.m. today. I will wait for you." He hands her a letter and said, "Bring all these items together. It would be helpful." Rosie nodded and went home. The letter read, "Meet me at the old oak tree in that park at 8:30 p.m. Come alone. Bring a pair of scissors, a black candle, and a photograph of Lalamissa. We will take care of the rest." Rosie felt a shiver run down her spine. What did this boy have planned? At 8:30 p.m., Rosie made her way to the park, the required items clutched in her hand. The park was deserted, except for a figure standing under the old oak tree. It was the mysterious boy. "Are you ready?" he said. The boy said, "Come inside the house. By the way, my name is Jacqueline." Rosie's eyes widened in surprise. "Jacqueline, that's a girl's name," she exclaimed. The boy smiled wryly. "I know," he said, "but I'm not a girl. I'm just ... different. Now, are you coming or not?" The house was creepy and dark, the air thick with dust and cobwebs. Rosie could hear the creaks and groans of the old wooden floorboards beneath her feet. Jacqueline led her to a room in the back, lit by a single, flickering candle. "What is this place?" Rosie said. Jacqueline smiled again. "This is where we'll take care of Lalamissa," he said. "But first, we need to prepare. Please, sit down." Rosie sat down on a rickety chair, her heart pounding in her chest. Jacqueline began to chant in a low, hypnotic voice. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and Rosie felt a creeping sense of dread. Jacqueline's eyes gleamed with an otherworldly intensity as he handed Rosie the scissors, black candle, and photograph of Lalamissa. "Cut the photograph into small pieces," he instructed. Rosie's hands trembled as she cut the photograph. As she finished cutting the photograph, Jacqueline snatched the pieces from her hand and tossed them into the air. The pieces fluttered down like confetti, and Rosie felt a jolt of electricity. The candle on the table suddenly flared. To life. "What is happening, Rosie?" whispered. Jacqueline's grin grew wider, his eyes blazing with an unnatural energy. "We're summoning something," he whispered back. "Something that will take care of Lalalimasa once and for all." And then, everything went black. Rosie slowly opened her eyes, grudgingly taking in her surroundings. She was lying on the sidewalk, her head throbbing with a dull ache. People walked by, some of them pointing and laughing. A group of teenagers stood nearby, snickering and making fun of her. "Look at her, sleeping on the street like a homeless person," one of them jeered. Rosie's face burned with embarrassment. As she struggled to sit up, she had no idea how she got here. She couldn't remember anything. She stumbled to her feet, brushing off her clothes. The teenagers laughed even harder. "Shut up," she yelled, but her voice was hoarse and barely audible. As she walked, the people began to whisper. She just wanted to go home, to forget the whole nightmare. But as she turned a corner, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A poster on the wall with a photograph of Lalalimasa, and underneath, a message scrawled in red ink, "You'll never be rid of me." Rosie was very scared. She ran towards her home and didn't dare to look back. As she entered, she was met with a scene that made her heart skip a beat. Her parents were sitting on the couch, their faces streaked with tears. "Rosie," her mother exclaimed, leaping to her feet. "Oh, thank God you're home." Her father rushed over, enveloping her in a tight hug. "We were so worried about you," he whispered, his voice shaking. "You've been missing since last night. We thought something terrible had happened to you." "I am sorry," Rosie said. "I didn't mean to scare you." But Rosie knew that it was not the end. She had a feeling that something bad might happen. Rosie's parents held her close, trying to comfort her, but Rosie's eyes were fixed on the TV. Suddenly, the channel changed to a news broadcast, and the anchor's serious face filled the screen. "Breaking news," the anchor said, his voice somber. "A 15-year-old girl was brutally murdered in her home last night. The victim, identified as Lalalimasa, was found dead in her bedroom with multiple stab wounds and evidence of severe mutilation." Rosie's eyes widened in horror as the anchor continued. According to police reports, Lalalimasa's body was found in a state of dismemberment with multiple body parts severed and scattered around the room. "Oh my God," Rosie exclaimed in horror. The anchor's face remained serious. "The police are currently investigating the crime scene, but so far, no suspects have been identified. The motive behind the murder is still unclear." Rosie felt like she had been punched in the gut. Lalalimasa, her classmate, her enemy was dead, murdered and the way she was killed Rosie single quotes as mind recoiled in horror. She thought back to the strange events of the previous night, the mysterious boy, Jacqueline, and the ritual they had performed. 2 days had passed since the news of Lalalimasa's murder, but Rosie was still reeling from the shock. She couldn't concentrate in school, and the image of Lalalimasa's mutilated body haunted her every waking moment. She was sitting in the living room when the doorbell rang. Suddenly, her mother called her out. "Rosie, come here." "Rosie, these officers would like to talk to you," her mother said, her voice trembling. Rosie's mind went blank as she stared at the officers. What did they want with her? Did they know something about Lalalimasa's murder? One of the officers, a tall, imposing man with a stern expression, stepped forward. "Rosie, we need to ask you some questions. May we come in?" As the officers entered, Rosie's cat, Mr. Whiskers, who had been sleeping peacefully on the couch, suddenly woke up and began to furiously lick his paw. One of the officers, trying to maintain a serious demeanor, tripped over Mr. Whiskers and face-planted onto the coffee table. Rosie's mother couldn't help but burst out laughing at the sight of the officer, sprawled out on the table, surrounded by teacups and cookies. Rosie, despite the tense situation, giggled at the absurdity of it all. The officer, quickly scrambling to his feet, looked around sheepishly and muttered, note to self, watch out for stealthy felines. Rosie, can you tell us about your relationship with Lala Limasa? He asked. We didn't really get along, she admitted. We had some fights, but I never thought it would escalate to ... too. What happened? The officer nodded ... and can you tell us about your whereabouts on the night of the murder? I was ... I was out with some friends, she stammered. The officer raised an eyebrow. Friends? Can you give us their names? Rosie hesitated, unsure of what to say. She didn't want to reveal her encounter with Jacqueline, but she also didn't want to lie to the police. But before she could answer, the officer asked another question, one that made Rosie's stomach turn. Rosie, do you have any knowledge of or involvement in the ... unusual mutilation of Lala Limas's body? Rosie was horrified by his words. The officer's question was disgusting and disturbing, and Rosie couldn't believe he would even suggest such a thing. But as she looked into the officer's eyes, she saw something there that made her blood run cold. He didn't just suspect her of being involved in the murder. He suspected her of being capable of the twisted, gruesome acts that had been committed.